Welcome to the very first episode of Nerd Flicks and Chill. This week we are talking about Game of Thrones, Episode 4, Book of the Stranger. This episode will start playing in
3, 2, 1, 0.
Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Nick.
And we are Nerd Flicks and Chill. This is our first episode. We came together and we decided to do a podcast. Nick, why are we doing this?
Because we feel like we have something to add to the conversation about pretty much anything that we would consider nerdy, from Game of Thrones to Star Wars, Marvel Cinematic Universe, pretty much everything.
I think it's because we are a fan of not only those different genres, but we're a fan of podcasts ourselves. We're a fan of watching YouTube videos and reviews and discussions and reading different, really anything that we can get our hands on for each of these. And sometimes it just isn't enough. We want more. And so we decided to create some ourselves because maybe you want more too.
Yeah.
So we are your
great. More. Yes, we are your more.
We're jumping right into episode 4 of Game of Thrones, Book of the Stranger. We're going to break it down by location as the show goes. And we start off the show at Castle Black.
That is correct. We see immediately Jon and Ed talking about where Jon's going to go next. Ed and Jon kind of debate that Night's Watch vow a little bit, which was pretty clever because I think a lot of people just thought that Jon's vow was fulfilled and he was going to use that to kind of lawyer his way out of the Night's Watch. But Ed actually offers a different interpretation where he talks about all nights to come. But that conversation is pretty short-lived because we get our Stark reunion. What did you think of the Stark reunion?
I got really emotional. I wasn't expecting it. It felt very abrupt. It's like, oh, all of a sudden here it is. Because when the previous episode ended, it kind of seemed like Jon Snow was leaving. It had that felt that it felt like he was just leaving Castle Black. So when we came in and he was still there, and last we knew, Brienne and Sansa and crew were going to be heading up to Castle Black. I was afraid that they were going to be passing each other, and I was going to be so upset if they passed each other, but they just went right into it, and I wasn't expecting it, and I really got emotional seeing that. And it kind of surprised me because they really did they even speak to each other at all in the series up until this point?
No, I think they actually shared one shot in the first episode where they were on screen at the same time, but I think that was it. And what's really interesting about actually finally getting this reunion is that we've had so many near misses with Stark reunions in the past. So it kind of felt like maybe they were going to yank the carpet out from under us again, but Thankfully they didn't. And there was so much great stuff that was going on in that scene. I love when Kit Harington comes out and he kind of is looking down at Sansa in the courtyard. And when she looks at him and he looks at her, they make eye contact. And Kit Harington does this little recoil. So you could see kind of the shock of him seeing his own, sister again, which is a really, really great scene. A lot of great subtle work. Kit Harington is such an underrated performer on a show full of great performers.
Yeah. Yeah, this has really given him his moment to shine. And I think in any performance, not just of his, but of anybody's, I really love the subtleties. And there were a lot in this. In fact, one of the things that I just noticed on my third watching of the show, when they're first coming through the gates on horseback, and we see that first moment between Brienne and Tormund, and he's just in awe looking at her, or that's at least how most of us are interpreting it. She kind of looks down, and if you notice, she immediately grabs her sword.
Yeah, it's such a great scene. Tormund in love, which is a great, I would watch an entire episode of just Tormund courting Brienne. I think that would be a great thing to see.
I would be all for it. And also, if you notice in that exact same moment, she's grabbing her sword as she's looking down. If you look at Pod, it's almost out of the frame, but if you look at Pod, he is shooting daggers in that direction. So he is not happy with what he's seeing, and I'm probably totally reading way too much into it, but in my mind, that's what's happening.
Well, and then this whole Stark reunion kind of gets the two Stark siblings in a room together where they're able to talk. And this, as far as I am aware of, is the first like truly brother sister moment that we've ever really had on this show between Starks. And it's really cool. They're like talking about the past, they're sharing a beer. It's just really, really well done.
I also think it's probably the most smiling that we've seen in this whole series. It was
Yeah.
really refreshing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. I know this is a relatively short scene between the two, and that we get some of the bigger takeaways about Sansa wanting to reclaim the North, but there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. One is that Jon, now that he's back in the Stark clothing, the Stark wardrobe,
Yeah.
he looks a whole lot like the young Ned Stark that we've seen in the previous episodes. Like they're just almost identical, except for kind of the dark hair.
Well, also too, I think he looks a lot like Robb Stark too. Because I think
Hmm.
Robb even at one point was wearing that exact same armor. Well, it's the Stark armor, but with the dark curly hair, and Death looks good on Jon Snow. He came
It's
back.
true.
He has a different air about him, the zombie air apparently.
Another really cool thing that we get from this scene is that we see something that becomes a reoccurring theme through the episode where characters are talking about their past. Sansa's talking
Yeah.
about how she used to be awful when she was younger. Jon talked about being kind of mopey. Jon also talks about all the people that he's killed in his time since he left home, which is a much larger list when he actually spells it out. There's a lot of stuff that this guy has been through since he left Winterfell.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that. It's like, wow, yeah, he has done a lot. Do you think though during this scene that it's something that happened off screen that we didn't get a chance to see? Do you think he told her about what happened to him?
I think it's definitely implied in their conversation because he seems to say, I can't stay here, not after what happened. And she
Yeah.
doesn't seem to say, like, well, what happened? So it sounds like that conversation was had. But I think they were wise in leaving that conversation off screen because we've heard John reference his own death quite a bit. Like,
That's true.
it's
It would
something
be
they have not run
redundant.
from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would be redundant because we've already seen how other people have reacted. Of course, she would have some kind of a reaction, but yeah, I think maybe having that it wouldn't really have bought us anything new. So yeah, I have to retract that. I think it was probably a good decision to not include that, even though
Yeah.
that's something I would have liked to have seen. But that doesn't. There's so much in this episode to give that to be repetitive with that. That doesn't buy us anything. So yeah, good call.
So Sansa wants to take back Winterfell. Jon is reluctant, but we come back to that story later. Then we end up with this awesome little scene with Brienne, Davos, and Melisandre.
Yeah, she just comes right in and bursts right into the middle of their conversation, right when Davos asks, "What happened to Shireen?" And then in comes Brienne. I saw what happened. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, wait, you weren't there when Shireen, with what happened to Shireen. Then she goes off into her thing about Stannis.
yeah, she
Um,
kind of lets Melisandre off the hook a little bit.
yeah. I'm surprised we didn't almost see a look of relief on Melisandre's face, but Melisandre's very concerned and she is very unsure around Brienne. She knows Brienne is not happy with her, and Brienne gave her a lot of side eye.
Yeah, it's hard to be reassuring when Brienne walks up, not only with her imposing physical stature, but the fact that she has Oathkeeper out in her hand,
Yeah,
which I think
unsheathed.
is a not so subtle message
Yeah,
that she's sending.
don't mess with me.
And speaking of Oathkeeper, one of the really cool things about this scene is that John has a line in his dialogue with Sansa when he says that, Father's ghost would come back and murder me if I didn't look after you. And it kind of ties into this idea that Ned Stark is a specter that runs through this entire series. Even though he died in season one, he's still there. He's still very much present. And not only is he present in conversation, but Brienne's sword, Oathkeeper,
Yep.
was at one time Ned Stark's sword, Ice, and it's just there now, kind of reunited with his children up at the wall. So he's still very much present in the show.
And now we have two Valyrian steel swords at the wall as well.
Yeah,
So that's pretty powerful right there. Although, well, I don't want to get into it, I guess, but um, in some of the previews, it looks like Brienne's not going to be staying at the wall for very long. So that doesn't really mean much. Um, so after the scene at Castle Black, we then move to the Vale. And
yes, where Robin Arryn is now 35 years old.
and 7 feet tall.
No kidding.
Oh my gosh, that moment that he he drops his bow and arrow and runs to his uncle, quote unquote. Uh, he towered over him. It was almost like seeing Sansa and Jon Snow and their height differences. To see the height differences between him and Peter Baelish was, and it was. I thought it was really funny that after that embrace, they immediately kind of, okay, we'll stage you over here by this falcon's cage, and you just continue to lean over
Yeah,
this
yeah.
cage so you don't look so tall the rest of the time. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a subplot about puberty going on in this season because you've got Bran, who they
Yep.
actually modified his look because it was starting to look ridiculous. So they made him a little bit more fitting to his age. But they didn't do that with Ollie, and they didn't do that with Robin Aaron. Robin's literally wearing the same clothes that we left him in the last time, and
Yeah.
he was literally pretty much doing the same thing with Jan Royce. So
Yeah, he still sucks at archery.
yes, he is not very good with the bow and arrow or weapons. I think they said he swings a sword like a girl with palsy last season.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was. He wasn't doing archery. He was sparring with a sword and shield very very poorly. Yeah, so he's presented with a little gift by Peter.
Yes. And since I know we're going to get into this, and after my rewatch, I'm starting to question this. Do you want to talk about the line that Littlefinger says when he shows the falcon to Robin?
Yeah, it stands out a little more once it's brought to your attention, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely does.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess we're gonna jump around a little bit. So I guess I'll just say this. Keep this in your mind that when Peter first greets Robin, he's like, "Oh, the defender of the Vale. I missed your name day. Come and see." And he motions towards the back of the carriage and, unveils this um, falcon that he gets him. But that it's the line that's very purposefully said and is kind of isolated on its own, and it seems awkward to say in that moment. So it to me it feels like it's very purposeful in its placement as far as the
Yes.
script goes, for him to say, "Come and see."
There's a lot of very purposeful dialogue in Littlefinger's scene here. Even though it's a short scene, it's actually very meaty in terms of the different dialogue that's in it. We'll come back to the wait and see, come and see part
Yeah.
towards the end when we get into the whole pink letter. But basically, what's happening here is that Littlefinger wants to rally the Knights of the Vale and step in to protect Sansa, who he believes is heading up to the wall to hang out with her brothers. So I think the big question here is what are Littlefinger's intentions? Does he feel remorseful, or is this part of his overall plan? What do you think?
I am of the mindset that he always has a plan. I think most of the things that have happened within this series have happened because of his plans. And I think that he is very masterful in knowing how people are going to respond. And he's very masterful in staying a couple steps ahead of that. So I would like to believe that he is fully right on with his plan and he knows what's going on. and
See, and
everything's happening the way he has envisioned it to.
this is where I'm going to kind of go a different way.
Hmm.
While yes, he is the ultimate puppet master in this series, I actually think he has a little bit of genuine remorse here, because he kind of has a blind spot when it comes to Sansa. Like when he kissed Sansa back in season four,
Oh,
it
so
was him.
creepy.
Yeah, and it's him acting on impulse. And for some reason, Sansa just seems to be a blind spot for him. And one of the things that this show has taught us is that great characters can be brought down because they have a blind spot. I mean, the most recent example of that was Roose Bolton, who was killed by Ramsay
Yeah.
because he had kind of a blind spot towards his son. So I want to say that Littlefinger right now, his intentions might be legitimately honest in wanting to defend Sansa, which might give you a tease as to what I think about the Pink Letter a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to point out here there are two really interesting lines here. One being we hear the phrase "the war's to come" again for the second time this season and the third time in the series.
Yeah.
And then we also hear from Peter Baelish, "Time for the Knights of the Vale to join the fray."
Yeah. What do you think that he meant by that? Do you think he meant literally or figuratively?
I think he meant figuratively. I think he wants the Knights of the Vale to join the battle.
And you don't
But
think it has anything to do with joining up with the phrase?
I don't. I actually think some of what's going on here is a little bit of subterfuge, and there's a little bit of kind of red herring involved in some of Littlefinger's dialogue here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy about the series is that there are so many nuggets kind of woven into things. There's so many subtleties that I think every episode garners multiple viewings to pick up on those. And even then, you don't always pick up on some of the things that they plant in there. And a lot of them don't play out, or you won't even realize them until sometimes seasons later. You go back and see something. Oh my gosh! I'm now that I'm seeing this with different eyes, I'm able to view this differently. Like for example, I'll use one with Peter Baelish when he was down in the crypts with Sansa. They had their conversation talking about Lyanna Stark. Just stuff in his performance as far as his reaction that you may not have even thought second, two things about, but then all of a sudden now you're seeing it with different eyes and you see the way he reacts to what she says, that maybe he knows something more than we thought.
Maybe he does, and that's kind of one of the little conspiracy theories that I've been starting to think about on this show. Does he know more about the relationship between Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark? And I actually think the show wants to suggest that he might, and that could conceivably tie in with some other things that we've heard from Littlefinger in the past. Maybe that he wants to offer a young man to Lady Olenna that might help in terms of the balance of power in King's Landing. That's a little bit odd and kind of tinfoily, but you never know.
Yeah, so do you want to explore that? Like, who do you think this young man is? Because when I first saw that scene, I immediately thought of Robin, but then at the same time, I'm thinking, what is Robin gonna get anybody other
Yeah,
than other than the Knights of the Vale, because he's, the defender of that or whatever. He's part of that family or that region. But I mean, really, is that really so you? That's not offering much.
well, my original read on that scene back then was that the young man that he was offering was Lancel Lannister, in being able to leverage Lancel's confessions to the High Sparrow against Cersei and have her locked up. That was my original read on it. Now, if that's not the case, then that means Littlefinger still has a young man to offer to Lady Olenna. And everything Littlefinger's doing is about strategy. From Harrenhal to the Vale to trying to become the Warden of the North, kind of playing both sides against each other, Bolton's against Lannisters. So he's slowly accumulating a very large and influential amount of land. So it makes me wonder if this young man is not Lancel Lannister. Instead, it's, somebody else. Maybe somebody connected to Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen.
Jon Snow.
It's possible.
But do you think though that he is? Well, let me back up a little bit. I know that the Stark children in the books are much younger than they are portrayed in the show. And rightfully so, because a lot of the subject matter that they are put through, it would be really distasteful to have somebody of that age go through it.
Yes.
On screen. A book is one thing, but on screen is something else entirely. Because I think in the show, I think Jon Snow's a little bit too old to be considered a young man.
That's true. That's true. But relative to Peter Baelish,
Well, yeah, that's true as well. Hmm. Yeah, who knows? We will have to see. Hopefully, we'll see something soon because things are really starting to heat up there. We'll get to King's Landing stuff a little bit later.
and one more thing before we leave the Vale,
Yeah,
Robin Aaron deserves a little bit of credit here. He's actually doing the right thing. He
but
wants to send the
nothing.
Knights of the Vale. Well, he wants to send the Knights of the Vale to help Sansa. He actually says it. He says, "She is my cousin. We should help her." So, props to Robin Aaron for actually not being creepy for once.
Oh, he's still creepy, even though he fell right into saying exactly what Peter Baelish wanted him to say. I'm gonna. It's not a coincidence that Peter Baelish came and brought him a gift, and he's buttering him up, and then all of a sudden, he is able to manipulate him into,
Yeah,
handing over the forces. So, no, he's still creepy. Ugh.
it's definitely creepy grooming being done there.
Yeah. So after we leave the Vale, we head over to Marine,
For Tyrion's meeting with the wise masters.
much to the dismay of Grey Worm and Missandei.
Yep, they have their little meeting with the masters of Astapor, Yunkai, and Volantis. They actually talk about funding the Sons of the Harpy, and the masters kind of deny it. But if you look at the scene as they're all pulling into Marine on their ships, they have Harpy banners on them.
I noticed that with chains and everything. It's like, wow, that's not very subtle.
Yeah, not very subtle at all.
But I like though that when Tyrion even mentions, you're going to stop the funding of the Sons of the Harpy. That, oh, we don't fund them. He's like, yeah, okay, but still, you're going to stop. He's just like, sure, you can say whatever you want, but I'm just going to let you know. Just go ahead and stop that.
Yeah, and Tyrion kind of has an interesting plan that he wants to put out there. He wants to allow for slavery to exist for the next 7 years. That's outside of Marine. They're not going to have any more slavery in Marine, but in the other cities, they're going to allow slavery to exist for 7 years. This does not seem to make Grey Worm or Missandei very happy.
No, but he's trying to play both sides. He's trying to appease them. I'm going to give you a little something. Um, and in return, you're gonna, stop sending the Sons of the Harpy to mess up everything. So hopefully, it'll work. Um, it's compromise, you know.
Well, and then Tyrion then has to go into the throne room and then explain to some of the citizens of Marine why they are negotiating with the Masters.
Yeah, can you imagine the citizens of Marine all of a sudden seeing that ship come into what a non-existent shipyard? I don't know how they came in because they don't even have any docks or anything, we're assuming. Because they completely burned last time. But yeah, can you imagine as being a citizen of having all this slavery abolished in your city, and then all of a sudden this giant ship with the enslaved harpy on the sails comes sailing in? Yeah, they're not very happy.
No, they're not. And one of the really kind of funny things about this scene is when Tyrion is trying to speak to them, and you see the translation: "Large, sorry, you wait so fat time."
And do you want me to go ahead and translate that for you? Maybe you should let me.
Yeah.
Missandei, she's so diplomatic. She's so good. Uh, but yeah, there no, that's okay. We speak the common tongue. We'll go ahead and speak for you.
Missandei and Grey Worm both back up Tyrion here too.
They do. They are, I mean, again, so diplomatic. They are not going to let their, you know, leader, even though he's technically not the leader, but he is filling in for Danny. They're going to back him up no matter what, and they both do, and you can tell it's painful for both of them. But I thought it was really great that Missandei actually ends up quoting Tyrion from earlier in the show.
Yes, and do you know who Tyrion was quoting in that scene?
He was quoting Peter Baelish.
Sure was.
Yeah. So again, everything comes down to, even though he's not in Essos, he's not in Marine, he's still having an effect over there. So we're seeing how far his reach can go. He doesn't even have to be there, and he's affecting things.
And this scene concludes with Missandei, Tyrion, and Grey Worm doing kind of a West Wing style walk and talk, where they're talking about who's using who, and some really, really good stuff from Grey Worm here. Like, we're really getting actual character development from Grey Worm and Missandei. They seem to have abandoned this kind of odd romance angle they were trying to take with these characters, and have now almost elevated them to the form of like a proper small council. They're providing advice, they're giving opinions, and they actually introduce the idea that Tyrion might be wrong here.
I even more so, I think it's incredibly powerful for the two of them who were both slaves, who are both servants basically of their various leaders, that they are taking a stand. That they actually even stood up to Tyrion to voice their opinion. That's huge for them to do that.
Hmm.
I mean, granted,
Absolutely.
and I don't believe they would do that to Danny, but even for them just to do that to her second in command, I guess is what you could consider Tyrion. Um, that's massive for them to do that.
Another thing that I did notice here, Tyrion, when he is talking to the wise masters, he says to them, "You will not receive a better offer than what he's offering in terms of the 7 years
Yeah,
to allow slavery to continue." And when you see the episode end, you realize they might want to jump on that offer pretty quick.
yeah. Well, I don't know if this is necessarily jumping ahead because I'm jumping ahead to that end scene just a little bit because there was something that I noticed that I didn't pick up on, or it didn't register to me when I watched the episode the first time, or even the second time. I got it the third time. That when you have the three slavers, the three masters that are sitting there in that room, and Danny, or Tyrion's basically telling them, Danny's away, but they don't really go into it. At least one of those slavers, or probably all of them if they're all in it together, they know exactly where she is. Because when you go later on into the show and Danny is in Vostoth Rock and she's basically having her mini trial with all of the calls there, the calls say that the masters have offered 10,000 horses for her.
That
Did you?
is true. Yeah,
They
I did
know where
notice
she
that.
is.
They know where she is, they
Yeah,
know who has her.
yeah. So they're kind of just playing along with Tyrion in that
Yeah,
meeting.
it's very interesting to see where all of this is going because
Mm-hmm.
we almost seem to have different trajectories happening here. But this is also kind of where Game of Thrones excels in TV shows. It's this kind of political maneuvering that's taking place behind the scenes that's really, really interesting.
It's very, very true. Well, since we started talking about Valstorth Rock, after Marine, that's exactly where we are.
Yeah, we get Jorah and Dario off on their two-man show where they're going to hunt down Danny and try to bring her back.
The Dario brothers.
Yeah, the Super Dario brothers. Jorah the Explorer.
Yes.
One thing that we are noticing about Jorah is he is weak. He is weakening,
Yeah. He's
probably as a
not,
result from grayscale.
most likely, yeah, he's not on his game. He is having trouble climbing or, trekking up um, that mountainside they are on, and he's not at his best fighting game because we saw him last season kicking some butt in that arena, And then now he's having a hard time just overtaking one unarmed person.
Yeah, they are looking down on Vice Dothraki, and Jorah, from his time spent with the Dothraki, seems to kind of know what's going on. Another interesting thing about this scene is we get an idea of numbers, and numbers become kind of a reoccurring thing that keeps popping up in this episode. Jorah says that there are about 100,000 Dothraki in Vice Dothraki. We also hear about army sizes and relative numbers of armies in this episode. So this is just kind of one of the things that jumped out. But uh, Jorah and Dario have decided to go into Vice Dothraki and try to take back the Queen Daenerys. And we've Jorah's grayscale is revealed to Dario in the scene.
Yep, don't worry, it didn't touch you.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of flimsy. Like, I feel like Jorah is a huge danger to everybody.
Oh yeah, oh I was thinking that when he was fighting the Dothraki guys. Like, oh well, you're just a massive plague walking around.
Yeah, this is like,
He's a
I don't know.
liability.
Jorah is a liability, and what's going to happen when Dany finds out? Or even just the populace of Vice Dothrak or Marine. I mean, he's literally a leper at this point.
Even worse. Even worse than that. And once Dario sees, his arm, he just says, "You know what happens." And yeah, I know what happens. And we even see, we just mentioned, but we even see the decline already happening. So they stash their weapons mostly.
They do, yeah.
I didn't even notice until this episode because you could see it so much more in frame. And I went back and saw some of Dario's older scenes. I'm like, oh yeah, it's totally there. I just didn't notice it. But his knife is basically a naked woman straddling the knife,
Yep.
and I didn't realize that. And he kisses it on the butt before he says that he's stashing it. Well, he did stash it, just not where Jorah thought he was stashing it.
Right. And then we get the scene with Dany and the Dosh Kalin and some interesting dialogue, a little bit of exposition that we get here when we get the experiences of some of the other Khaleesi's that are there. And there's one in particular, I believe her name is Lazarine, who Dany kind of immediately strikes up a bond with. And this kind of ties into another part of the ongoing theme of this episode, which is broken brothers and strong sisters. We saw a little bit of it with Jon and Sansa. We're going to see more of it as we get later into this episode. But we also have kind of this sisterhood of the Dosh Kalin where they're starting to bond over these different experiences.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is very interesting as well, um, that this younger Khaleesi that's there, it seems as if her experience kind of mirrors Dany's experience to an extent, that she was taken by a call when she was very, very young. And I think that's what endears her immediately to Dany, is that they've shared this experience where they were taken, not at their own will, and it was forcefully so. Um, but then there's the older woman who I guess is the matriarch of that group, and she's talking to Dany, and she says, I the other ones here, they don't think we should be mixing with, our bloodlines with other people, which I thought was kind of interesting because the Targaryens are known for all of their incest and
Yeah.
keeping all of their bloodlines all together. So her lineage isn't fond of that either. Um, but yeah, she tells her, I hope you get to stay with us. And Dany is just being very silent and kind of playing along and looking into the flames that she sees in there.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great YouTube video that does recaps of the episodes, and they pointed out this flames thing for a couple weeks now. How whenever she's in the Temple of the Dosh Kalin, she is constantly looking into the fire, which is something that continued over into this episode.
Yeah, really nice subtleties and staging that they have throughout the series. So she excuses herself to go
Hmm.
make to go make water, which I don't know why. I'm like, I have this sense of humor from a 7-year-old, and it just made me chuckle. Um, it's so juvenile, but anyway, so she's able to step away for a moment and says that she really needed to get away because the old ladies in there stink, which I'm sure it does. I watched this whole series, and I'm thinking, man, the smells that must actually be around there have to be incredibly potent everywhere, not just there in Vostoth Rock, but I'm thinking
Right.
down in King's Landing where everybody's being held. They're being held down in the crypts, or not crypts, but the dungeons down there. I'm like, ooh, that's got to be ripe. Anyway, things that I think about while I'm watching the show that have nothing to do with the show. So they step away, and she is trying to see if is this. Well, the girl asks, "Oh, is it true? You have dragons?" And yeah, would you like to see them someday? I just thought that was a sweet little moment, and then it's interrupted very abruptly.
It is, and yeah, it is a great little bonding moment between the two. You could see that Danny does have kind of an affection towards Lazarine, and then we do see Dario and Jorah when they're like, "Hey, we're here, we're ready to spring you," and Danny's like, "Yeah, that's so not gonna work."
Yeah,
And then Jorah says to her, "Well, at least we can try," which is kind of a weak line coming from Jorah. At least we can try. It's kind of a. It struck me as a little bit odd. But Danny's got a bigger plan here, and one of the things that I like is when she tells Lazarine, don't betray me, and actually calls her Khaleesi, which is kind of a very cool bit of reverence that she has for her.
yeah, and that plays into towards the end, which we will get more into that next. But after that moment, when we're in Vostoth Rock, we go to the Septs of Baelor.
Yeah, where we get the High Sparrow talking to Marjorie.
Yeah, which is very interesting once you really start to peel that back. I think they are both playing each other, but who's going to win that battle? Because they are both very manipulative, conniving people, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I paid more attention on my third rewatch to what the High Sparrow is saying here. And interestingly enough, he asks Marjorie, like, what would you seek out if I let you go? And she says, my family, my husband. But he tells her that that leads to money, power,
And wealth, yeah.
finery, and
Mm-hmm.
essentially equating her family to sin, which is really interesting. And he proceeds to go on providing his background as a shoemaker, and how he would make really nice shoes, and he'd make money, and he would try to indulge himself in the refinery of the wealthy, and how it just wasn't fulfilling for him.
So, what do we think is the true story on him, though? Because last season we saw a conversation between him and Cersei, and Cersei asks him, why no shoes? What's the deal with this? And he tells her, oh, I gave them to somebody who really needed them. But then he tells Marjorie that he was in the middle of this crazy party, or the aftermath of this crazy party, and he just left without even putting his shoes on.
Yeah, I think this scene really kind of underscores how much of a hypocrite the High Sparrow is. He talks about running away from money, finery, and power, yet he wields a lot of power right now in King's
Yes,
Landing.
very, very much so.
So much
So,
so that he's even talked about overthrowing an empire.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, he mentions this crazy party and too much wine, and last season we heard him say, "Oh, he never liked the taste of it." So, you know, just like Marjorie, he will change his story according to who is his audience and what does he have to gain from that story. Uh, so she plays along, and she makes it seem as if she's paying attention to uh, the book of the stranger that's being told to her, that's being read to her, and she's just completely playing along. And I think when she answers, her family, I think she believes that that's going to be a good answer, because that's going to, she's not going to say, well, first thing I'm going to do is take a bath and, comb my hair and put on some clothes. I'm going to immediately go to my family. And that makes it seem very nice and wholesome. And he has a way of spinning that.
Would have been great if she would have come back and said, "I would come back here with my army and burn this fucking house down."
Well, and little do we know that it seems like that's that's the plans that we think are going to be happening. Or little does she know. So he allows her then to go and see her brother.
Yes. A couple of things really quick about this High Sparrow scene in the Book
Yeah.
of the Stranger in particular is the Book of the Stranger seems to, the Stranger always refers to death in the Faith of the Seven, but the Book of the Stranger seems to refer to a character walking through a graveyard, kind of having the realization that death comes for us all and that, the the downside of money, power, and finery and how irrelevant it all is. But one of the bigger things that we noticed here through this archetype of the Book of the Stranger is that the High Sparrow is again telling a story about his past. And this is something that happens over and over and over again in this episode. He's talking about his past. We heard this earlier with John and with Sansa, and everybody talking about their past. Even Davos, when he's talking to Brienne about Renly Baratheon, he says, well, that's in the past.
Mm.
And Brienne says it's in the past, but I cannot forgive or forget. So we get a lot of conversation going on about the past and what has happened in the past and how people reconcile their past and move forward, which is kind of an interesting thing that keeps popping up in this episode.
That's a really, really good observation. That's a great find.
You did mention Loras. So
Yeah.
Marjorie gets to go see Loras,
Hmm.
and Loras is broken. He's
Yeah.
totally broken.
Just make it
Another
stop.
broken brother. The second broken brother we've seen in the show. Maybe the third, if you wanted to count the Jorah and Dario relationship, as Jorah's kind of a broken brother too. But he is definitely broken. Marjorie seems a little bit concerned about what Loras may have said to the Faith.
Yeah. How much does he know? Does he,
I,
does, has it been alluded to that he knows what happened? Well, I know he knows what happened to Joffrey, but has it been alluded to that he knows that Lady Olenna and Peter Baelish had something to do with it?
that's never been alluded to on the show. And it's something that I kind of doubt. I feel like that conspiracy to assassinate a king would probably have been kept small. But who knows? Maybe he does know more than we think he does. But Marjorie definitely seems concerned about what Loras might have said because he even says to her, "I just want it to stop."
When we don't know what it is that they are doing to him.
Yeah,
I mean, he appears very broken, and it seems like with Marjorie, it seems like they really aren't doing much to her. Like she's in there and she's just kind of sitting there, and the shame nun will come in and read to her. It looks like at one point that she was very physically violent with her. I think there was a couple episodes ago where he kind of brushed her hair away, and you could see that she had blood on her ear, and he said that, oh, I'll talk to her about that, in reference to the nun. Um, but it seems like she's being maybe treated a little bit better than her brother, and I think they are playing her brother against her to break her down. Because I mean that's the whole reason why she's even in there is because she was standing up for her brother. She was covering for her brother, and so they know that's going to be a weakness for her.
yeah. I don't think the High Sparrow has a whole lot on her.
No.
Like, there's not a lot of evidence the way he had against Cersei. But Loras he has quite a bit on. So you're definitely right. They're definitely using her to kind of using him to. They're leveraging him against her to try to get her to maybe confess or something like that. But we see Marjorie calculating a little bit here at the end of the scene, and we don't know what her next move is.
No, because she's trying to tell him stay strong. You know, and he says, "Oh, just make it stop. I don't care anymore." And she's, "Have you told them that? Have you told them that you don't care?" And he's like, I just want it to stop. And you almost can't hear it, but she then, embraces him, and you can barely hear her say, she says, all right. Very, very subtly, you can hear that. So I think she believes that she's playing along, but I think the High Sparrow and the Sparrows are really playing her.
I think that's correct. And I think that can also be applied to our next location, which is King's Landing.
Yep. So then we see, I thought this was a great moment where Cersei is going to walk in on a counseling, or not counseling, but a session where Grand Maester is advising King Tommen. And Cersei wants the room. She wants him to leave, and we get this really long exit of the Grand Maester, and you just hear his chains clanking as he's kind of shuffling along. And from a couple seasons ago, we know he's pretty spry.
Yeah, he's totally full of shit.
He's
There,
completely full of crap, but I loved the long shot. The camera was pulled back. You can see everybody there, and he's just kind of slowly shuffling along, taking the long way around the table, out the door, and there's nothing for them to do but watch him go. And it made me chuckle. I thought that was really funny setup.
there's a great deleted scene. I think it was from season 3, where Tywin Lannister is in King's Landing and he's got some fish in a barrel, literally fish in a barrel. This is kind of a pre-Red Wedding, foreshadowing, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking to Pycelle, and he actually calls him out on it. He calls him out on this kind of weak man facade. And as soon as he calls him out on it, you see Pycelle's posture completely straighten up. You hear his voice change completely, and you see that he is a very polished, very smart man who's putting out this facade of being weak and feeble. Never made it
Wow.
into the show, but it is a great deleted scene that you can look up and find.
Ooh, I'll have to do that. I don't think I've ever seen any deleted scenes from the series at all, but I'm definitely gonna look up that one. So he leaves,
Hmm.
and then we have the conversation between Tommen and Cersei, and Tommen has some information for
He
Cersei.
does. He has some information, but he's afraid to talk to Cersei. So there's this kind of back and forth between the two. And in that back and forth, Cersei repeats the line again for the second time in this episode. We hear it. It's in the past. Davos
Yeah,
said the line, it's in the past earlier. Cersei has said the line, it's in the past now, which also kind of ties into this whole idea of characters talking about the past in this particular episode. So she coerces whatever this secret is out of Tommen. And whatever it is, it's something that Tommen finds upsetting because he does have a very emotional reaction to it.
he has tears in his eyes. You can see the way the light is catching in his eye. There are tears in his eyes. So we don't find out what that is. I think we are led to believe what it's going to be by the next scene, but we don't really know what that is.
Yeah.
And something that I thought was very interesting as well, if you notice, Cersei, she puts her hand on the side of his face, and then she moves her hand down onto his chest, and it seems very, very deliberate because it's almost right in the center of the shot. And she's saying, I'm your mother, you can tell me anything. And you see that she's wearing this ring. Did you notice
Hmm.
that she's
I
wearing
did.
this ring? And that's Joffrey's ring.
Yeah. So
I don't know
what
if that means anything, but
I,
I just thought it seemed very, again, very purposeful, that there's so many things that this series does that are not by accident.
I agree, but just to kind of play devil's advocate here,
Sure.
I also think that given how purposeful everything is on the show, that they could very well be setting up some red herrings for us too.
Yeah. Well, I think they're also aware of, they're highly, actually, they're highly aware of how much dissecting the fans and the viewers do of each episode. So I think it really does them well, and I think it's great that they throw in these red herrings to throw people off or to stir up this discussion, because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this series. is that, downtime between episodes and downtime between seasons, is that there is so much discussion going on, and I don't recall something like this with a series that I've personally watched or have been involved in since Lost, and that's been about 10 years.
Right.
I don't recall any, just so much discussion and just people trying to figure out exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think
When
it's really cool.
when you talk about dissecting, do you mean something like two people going over each scene in each episode, talking about what's going on, and then broadcasting it out to the internet?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, me neither.
No, I mean, but where people are really, I mean, some of the things that people observe in these episodes, I find so fascinating. And how people, oh, well, that line was said in season 2. I'm like, wow, you have an amazing memory, because I don't necessarily think that way. And I'm not going to lie that a lot of these things that I've even said in this episode are things that other people have observed that I just find so fascinating. Um, that people have made these connections, as I can't take credit for that because I am not that good.
I think a lot of that comes from Brian Cogman, who's kind of like the master of the mythos for the series. It kind of keeps all the mythological continuity in order, and I think he has a lot to do with that. I think there's a lot of his fingerprints on it in that case. There are so many little breadcrumbs here and there. When we got that Tower of Joy flashback a couple of weeks ago, we have this whole big kind of what's in the tower moment, and I think that for viewers, when they finally find out what's in the tower, assuming that the classic fan theory about it is true, I think you'll go back when you rewatch the series and notice that those breadcrumbs were placed for that all the way back in the first episodes of the series.
Well, I think I'm going to go back and compare with Lost again. Um, One of the things that I think is very apparent in this series is that they know where it's going. They know what the end game is. They know what is leading up to that. So they have had the luxury of being able to place these little breadcrumbs that you can then go back and find on multiple viewings to put everything together. Whereas Lost, it was known that they were kind of making up stuff as they went along. And it's kind of obvious because it kind of goes in different directions, and there's questions that never get answered or things that don't come together and make sense. But gosh, it was so awesome to try and figure stuff out. But with this one, we actually get the payoffs. So I'm finding it even more satisfying with this series than I did with that one. I just wish this one would go on as long as that one did, because it looks like we're only going to have another season or two of this left. And it seems like
Right.
we're just scraping the surface of what can happen in all of this. I love it.
So getting back to this
Yes,
Tommen and
reel me
Cersei
back
thing.
in.
Yeah.
Reel me back
So,
in.
so getting back to this Tommen and Cersei thing, the next scene that we see, we don't actually see whatever this thing is that the High Sparrow doesn't want Cersei to know, but we see her and Jaime disrupting another small council meeting, and Cersei tells Lady Olenna that Marjorie is going to make her walk of atonement.
Yeah, but when I think one of the things that's very different in this time when Cersei and Jaime walk in and they interrupt. And although this time, though, they're really only interrupting Kevin and Lady Olenna, there's nobody else there. It's a very small council meeting that's happening. When they walk in this time, they're walking in with a purpose, and you can see it on their faces. I mean, when they walked in before, they had a purpose because they were going to be interrupting, but it had a very different air about it. It had a very different feel. Where Cersei now is coming in, she's got the upper hand, and she's taking control of the situation right now.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the Lannister twins in action doing their thing.
Yeah,
Um, I like seeing them together in a way. I like seeing them have scenes together, even though that's kind of come at the expense of Jamie's arc a little bit, because it feels like his arc is kind of stalled out.
yeah.
But the big thing is, Lady Olenna basically says, there is no way that Marjorie's going to do this whole walk of shame thing. You did it. That was humiliating. There's no way the queen is actually going to go ahead and do this. So they devised this plan where they're not going to have the Kingsguard do anything at all. They're going to obey Tommen and not get involved, but they're going to allow the Tyrell army to go in and take Marjorie back into crown custody.
Yeah, another Cersei scheme. What's her track record now? None of her schemes have worked.
It doesn't bode well for her usually because
No.
she is not as smart as her father was. And I think that that's one of the things that we can kind of see in some of her different plotting and planning. And what's interesting about this is what they're proposing is the exact same plan that got them in trouble with the High Sparrow in the first place.
Yeah, I'm also, and again, this is another thing that they're setting up that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out because I think this could go any number of ways. I think it's very interesting that she's basically inviting the Tyrell army into their city. Their army is huge. I think they even say what is it? It's the second largest army.
Second,
They don't say who the first is. Are we to
which
assume that it's theirs?
I believe the Lannisters have the largest army. I think the Tyrells have the second largest army. But there's some differences between the books and the show. But again, though, it does tie back to in this episode we're talking about relative size of armies.
Very precarious to have their. I mean, she's putting a lot of faith in them to do this. Because you have the Tyrells that are basically storming into King's Landing. So I'm wondering how Cersei is really going to play this. Is she really going to play this as the Tyrells are coming in and taking over the Sparrows? Is she going to try and play innocent in this?
Well,
No, it's them coming in, and I don't know. I think it can go any number of ways.
well, I think the first question here is when the High Sparrow was having his conversations with Tommen, was the High Sparrow betting on Tommen telling Cersei?
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. I think and maybe that's him testing the waters. Let's see if this comes back. Let
Right.
me let me
And
throw this out here and see what comes back.
and then the second question is Cersei being honest when she's telling Lady Olenna and Kevin that Marjorie is going to do this walk of atonement?
Yeah, because we don't know what Tommen told her.
Right, so we don't know if this is a double cross or a triple cross, or maybe the Tyrells will double cross the Lannisters, because I don't like this idea of allowing a rival army into King's Landing.
Yeah.
It's very reminiscent of what happened during Robert's Rebellion when the Mad King opened the gates to Tywin Lannister and the Lannister army sacked the city. So there's historical precedent within the show that suggests that this might be a really awful idea.
Oh, see, I didn't know that part. I never read the books. I listened to the audiobook for the first one, and that's about it. So no, I
Now,
didn't know that.
does this plan stand a chance?
Mm. It stands a chance for somebody, but I don't think Cersei's plans ever go the way that she wants them to. So I don't think it's going to happen the way that she wants it.
We did also get a mention that she's going to be having a trial coming up. She says in a
Yes.
few days on the show. So,
Right.
with regards to showtime, I don't know if that's going to be next week or the week after, but we know this trial's coming up. She does not seem overly concerned about it, though.
No, she doesn't, because she just kind of says it in passing that she takes all of the attention and focuses it on Marjorie's potential walk, but she makes it sound as if her trial is going to be after the walk. So it looks like whatever we might be seeing this week is the confrontation between Jamie and the Sparrows prior to Marjorie's walk. I don't think we're going to see a trial anytime soon.
See, and that's kind of odd in terms of the show because you would think that if their plan goes according to plan,
Mm,
that there would not be a walk or not that there would not be a trial because the High Sparrow would be either in custody or dead, as Jamie mentions. So I almost get the impression that would have to be trial first, then that encounter that we can see in the trailer on the steps of Baelor, but I'm not sure. It's a
yeah,
little unclear.
it makes me wonder too, what is a walk like? It seems like that's their MO for everything, is to have them do that walk. Because they had the other High Septon, he did a naked walk through the city. Cersei does a naked walk. They're talking about having Marjorie do this naked walk. Um, but look at what their crimes were in their eyes. Marjorie, all she did was cover for her brother. But compare that to what Cersei did. Do they really, should they really have the same punishment?
I don't know that you're gonna really get answers if you try to look for consistency in a religious organization.
Well, that's a very good point. Or maybe they just see everything on the same level. Like no matter what it is that you did, whether you are whether you're a patron at a whorehouse, or you're sleeping with your brother, or you're just covering for your brother, you have to walk naked through the city. It doesn't
There's some
matter.
in, there's some interesting musical cues in this scene too, because as they're
At the
proposing
very
this,
end,
yeah, we're
yeah,
getting the Reigns of Castamere underneath this scene, which is usually the theme for Lannister conspiring. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of what this overall plan is. Like, um, are they trying to stitch up the Tyrells here, or what?
yeah, this will definitely be a good scene to go back and watch again after we see whatever it is that plays out to see some
And
of those subtleties.
again, this is what Game of Thrones is great at: are these little maneuvers and the actual Game of Thrones that's happening. I have no idea where this is going to go, and I could literally see it going in three different directions.
So after that uh, small council meeting in King's Landing, we are launched over into Pike for another brother sister reunion.
Yes, and another broken brother
Yeah.
and strong sister. We've got Theon and Yara.
Yeah, so he is basically telling his sister that he's broken. She's suspect as to why he's there. Well, not necessarily why he's there, but she's suspect over the timing of his arrival. And we know he had no idea what was going on.
Right.
But she's suspect because they're going to be going through this king's moot to decide upon a new king. And he tells her, I've been broken. He broke me down. I had no idea what even happened until I landed.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this scene is how many times Yara is trying to get him to buck up. She says, look at me, and stop crying, stop crying. It almost reminded me of that scene in The Godfather where Johnny Fontaine goes to Vito Corleone, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and
Stop
Marlon
saying you're
Brando grabs
sorry.
him. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
you can act like a man. So
Yeah.
it kind of reminded me of that. But what's really funny is as soon as Theon says to her, I want you to rule the Iron Islands, she lets go of him. And she's like, oh, well then, if that, fine.
Yeah, you can completely see her relax in that moment. It's like, "Oh, well okay then. Then that's settled."
So we know who Theon is going to be supporting in the King's Moot.
So tell me a little bit about the Kingsmoot. I mean, is he really going to have much of a say? I mean, I know that he is. I don't know how this works.
It's kind of like a political convention. It's really the closest that anything in Westeros gets to any kind of democratic principles, where you have all these different people that kind of throw their name in and they talk about, they make their case for why they're the best person set to rule. They talk about how much they've plundered and what they've acquired in terms of riches and wealth, and essentially it comes down to a selection place for them among all of these different candidates. So it's kind of like a political convention to kind of give you the short version of it.
Okay. So he's basically telling her, I'm gonna stand and vouch for you.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what happened in Pike. After that, we head back to Winterfell for dinner,
Yes,
or
yes.
or for a snack rather. We see.
Another joyous Ramsay Bolton romp.
Yes, I thought it was very interesting that he is filleting an apple, and which I would think that if he's that skilled, and he would be peeling that apple so much better than he was. It was very kind of clunky, but that's just me.
Yeah, maybe it was a dull blade.
I guess so. So yeah, we see Osha come into the room, and she thinks she's going to take control of this situation. And of course, we know Ramsay's history that nothing takes control of him. He's got control of everything. I actually thought for a moment that she was going to be okay, that she was going to make it through out of this room because he asks her, do you know who I am? You're a lord. He kind of chuckles. Yeah, I'm a lord. Uh, have you seen my banner? And she's like, yeah, the flayed man. Do you eat them afterwards? And it was funny, the expression on his face. He was almost disgusted by it. Like, no. And she's just, oh, well, I've seen worse, which we know that she has because there's a band of wildlings that are cannibals. So she has seen worse. And when she says that, he gets that evil Ramsay grin on his face, and I immediately thought, oh, he's just found his new plaything
Yeah, I thought that too initially.
because he's lost his three playthings that he had. He lost all of those, and I thought, oh, okay, that's what her role is going to be now, but not so much.
Yeah, and going back to that "do you eat them" line, I actually think this line kind of reveals a little bit more than we suggest because of the amount of disgust that Ramsey shows when he hears it.
Yeah.
I mean, Ramsey is not somebody to shy away from something that's, off-putting. I mean, this guy basically lives his life in the world of off-putting. But that line kind of took him aback a little bit, and I think there's a little bit of Ramsey might not know what he's getting into fully here with regards to the wildlings and what they're capable of.
It's a really good observation. Yeah, it was kind of funny. There's no, like, what do you think I am, savage or something? And I also thought it was kind of funny too because there's long been a reader theory on the Bolton family, specifically Roose Bolton. With there was a thought that maybe he was some kind of a vampire or something, and he consumed um, parts of his victims or whatnot. So I thought that was kind of a funny nod to that.
Yeah, well, you never know. Maybe he actually is Ramsey Bolton now. Maybe Ramsey is Roos.
Maybe.
Another
Uh,
thing about this scene too, just the placement of the apple in this scene too.
uh,
It's so classic movie cliche.
of
Like it's
of
just
having the villain peeling an apple.
well, if a character is a dick, he has an apple.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, now I don't know that we needed to necessarily know that because we can kind of tell that Ramsey is a dick, but the apple was kind of an interesting touch.
So, so Osha thinks she's gonna play Ramsey with her body. That she thinks that's what every man wants. And I really thought Ramsey was gonna buy into it, and she was trying to go for that knife, but she didn't realize that he had another knife. That's not a knife. That's a knife right here in my
Yeah.
hand and in your neck.
Yeah, I mean, not sure what else to say about this, but he just kind of leaves her dead on the floor.
Yeah,
Ramsey crosses off another character.
and continues to eat his apple afterwards.
Yeah, with the
Uh,
same knife
yeah,
too.
I know.
Same
He just
knife.
cleans it off and goes right back into it. So after that, we head a little bit further north back to Castle Black.
Castle Black for a mealtime
Yes.
where we get one of the rare moments of pure joy in the show, which is watching Tormund ogle Brienne the Beauty.
Ugh, it will never get old to me. I have watched it repeatedly, and there are so many little snippets on YouTube where people have put in different bits of music to it, and it's just delightful to me. And yeah, if you go into my history on YouTube, it's just you'll see just strings of Brienne and Tormund scenes, and I love it. I love it, and I love Ed's his little look. He's like, okay, his
Yeah,
little
like
eyebrow raised. That's so wonderful.
yeah. And what's really great about this scene in particular is Brienne's reaction. It's actually not one of disgust, which I think shows how little she has ever had to deal with this kind of attention in her life.
Yeah, I don't think she knows what to do with it. I took it her response was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what's happening over there, but yeah, she doesn't know what to make of it. Because it seems like her history of men in the past, it's she was ridiculed or she was made fun of when she was younger, and then she ended up falling for gay men. Then there seemed to be something between her and Jamie a little bit, but I don't know if that's just kind of like a bosom buddy type thing or what's, I think, I don't know what's going on there. But she's never really, from what we know, she's never really had any kind of honest affection, I guess is what is what Tormund is giving her, but the closest thing maybe she's ever received, and she just doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, there's a definite affection between her and Jamie. That I think is for certain. But I don't know that Jamie is the best romantic match for anybody
No,
at this point. But
no.
Tormund and Brienne works on paper. It's a great matchup.
I love it, and I hope we get more of it, and I hope that it doesn't mean anything foreshadowing anything negative for either one of them in the
No
future.
kidding. It feels like
Uh,
we've gotten so much payoff that like we're just it's gonna we're gonna have the rug pulled out from under us
I
again.
don't want it.
It's like, ah, you're enjoying this, huh? Well, we're gonna kill everybody in the show next week
You're right. So our romantic moment is interrupted
by
by
a rider.
a rider from Winterfell with a white. He comes in with a Bolton shield and a white flag.
Hmm.
So and he delivers a very famous to the book reader's letter.
Yes, yeah, it's called the Pink Letter in the books, or it's also called the Bastard Letter, depending on who you're talking to. The Pink Letter is really because of the pink wax seal that's on the letter,
Hmm.
and the letter reads some pretty harsh words.
Yeah, so harsh that Jon Snow can't even finish it or can't even say it out loud.
Yeah, definitely. And Sansa has to grab the letter from him and finish it. Lots of stuff in there. But what is the key line that we get in the pink letter
That we've heard before in this
in that
show.
episode? Yeah.
Yeah, come and see.
Come and see. Winterfell is mine, bastard. Come and see. And the come and see theme keeps showing up. It's actually kind of well written. It's kind of a well written letter by Ramsay, and even as dark and psychotic as it is.
It really is, but I know that there is some contention as to who the author of this letter really is, mainly in the books, because I believe here in the show, if I'm not mistaken, Ramsay did sign it because he actually, did he sign it Ramsay or did he just sign it the Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North? Did he? I don't remember if he had his name on there because I do
He
remember them saying the Lord of Winterfell, you know, Warden of the North, because that really struck John and
It
Sansa.
did.
Yeah,
It did. Yeah, the line it actually ends with Ramsay Bolton, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. And
yeah,
John can't even he almost can't even say it. He almost can't even repeat it.
yeah. He choked it out pretty much.
And
'Cause
with regards to the author of the Pink Letter,
yeah,
you know, that come and see thing, we heard that from Littlefinger earlier in the episode, so maybe it does suggest that it's there and something that Littlefinger might be behind. What do you think of who the author of the show Pink Letter is?
I know that.
Go on record right now. Who's the
Go on record. I really think that it was Ramsay that sent it in the show. I know there's some question to that because there's some wording that's in the letter that is inconsistent with things that Ramsay has said. But then again, like if I'm writing a letter, I don't write the way that I speak. So I can let that go because there in the letter there's a reference to his dogs. But Ramsay, I don't think has ever called them his dogs. He's called them his hounds. So some people are thinking, well, he didn't write that then because that's not his same wording. Um, I don't know if I buy that, but I do think it was Ramsay that sent it. Although I know that within the books there's some contention as to who wrote it because the letter wasn't signed, and there are some consistencies in that letter as well. And there's a lot of people that think any number of people could have written it, but Peter Baelish comes up repeatedly as the one that people really think is masterminding all of this. And, the fact that Peter Baelish said that "come and see" line earlier in the episode, does that reflect that? Is that another red herring that we've been given? Are we to think that there's that possibility?
I am of the belief that this is a total red herring. I think that Ramsay Bolton sent the letter. I think
Okay.
Ramsay Bolton sent the letter in the show and in the books. I think a lot of the book conjectures because um, people didn't want to accept some of the ideas that are in the pink letter in the books. But with regard to the show pink letter, I think that's a total red herring about the come and see. I think that's intentionally there to provide a little bit of misdirection, primarily because if you look at the show version of the letter, it's delivered by a Bolton man with the flayed man shield.
That's true.
We
That's very true.
also we also had those 30-second teaser clips that were released way back. There was one for the Lannisters, there was one for the Dothraki, and there was one for Winterfell, where they had like a single line of dialogue with no actual images. It was just kind of like a standard image that you saw. And there was the line from the bastard letter, "Winterfell is mine, come and see," and it was read by Ramsay Bolton. I do not believe that Littlefinger is behind this. I think this is a legit scenario where we're setting up the battle for the North.
I don't think that anybody other than Ramsay was the one who wrote that letter.
Yeah, and a lot of the conspiracy theories in the show I just don't buy into. I don't buy into the Umber conspiracy that somehow the Umbers are playing the Boltons. I don't buy into that one either. But I will say this. I don't want to derail people who have this Littlefinger sent the pink letter conspiracy theory. I'll actually offer one kind of interesting thing that might support it.
Okay.
Why would Baelish activate the Knights of the Vale now? It makes very little sense where if he does not send the pink letter, why is he activating them now? The timing of it is a little bit strange to me. You know what's interesting to me? There's a couple of things that I'm very curious about, and that is at what point will Cersei and Jaime and Kevin and Tommen know that Tyrion is the advisor for Daenerys Targaryen? At what point will that be revealed to them? Because it's not exactly like Tyrion's keeping a low profile anymore.
Very interesting. I don't know why I never even thought of that. Um, wouldn't that be a moment where all of a sudden Cersei, or no, I'm sorry, all of a sudden Dany, they make their trip across the sea, across the narrow sea into King's Landing, and there we go off the boat walks Tyrion and Dany together.
Yeah. Now, just kind of talking about this stuff that was going on with the pink letter. After they read the letter, Sansa has the line, "A monster has taken our home and our brother, and we need to go back and save them both." And this seems to be the thing that draws Jon back into the conflict. Jon is very much serving the role of the reluctant hero right now, and after he was murdered, it's almost even more so. And then again, just before that, in this scene, we get another discussion about the size of an army, which is just another interesting side note of that. But Jon now seems to be convinced that he will step into this battle and try to reclaim Winterfell.
So after that discussion at Castle Black, we are back in Vos Dothrak.
Yes, one more thing though, one
Oh,
more
sure.
thing about what's going on at Castle Black is just how strong Team Castle Black is right now, because it's kind of got this feel of like the Westerosi Avengers, where you've got Jon Snow, who's literally like a resurrected man. You've got Davos, who's this brilliant advisor. You have one of the best knights in all of Westeros with Brienne of Tarth. So you have all these things. You have Tormund Giantsbane, who is just a natural badass. You even have a giant nearby. You have one floating around out there. And if all else fails, they have their own Scarlet Witch hanging out up there too with Melisandre. So they have a very deep bench up at Castle Black right now. It's a very formidable group of individuals.
I absolutely love that comparison. I love it. Um, so yeah, we're down in Vos Dothrak where we've got Danny's trial going on with the I like people calling the Calcon down there.
Yeah, it's not much of a trial, is it? It's really just them sitting around talking about what to do with her.
Yeah. So yeah, they're trying to decide what are we going to do with you, and they have their idea of what they would like to do, and she is not having any of it. She just flat out says, "No, I don't want that." Uh, and again, we see her eyeing some flames.
And we see her talking about her past, talking about what Drogo said to her about, their son being the stallion that mounts the world. Another example of a character talking about their past.
Yep. And when Danny is in her conqueror mode, I love just the look that she has in her eyes. You can just tell from the start of this scene while she's listening to them that it's not going to end very well for them. She just gets that sparkle in her eyes. She just gets that look, that air about her that she's in conqueror mode, that
And
there's
we
something
also,
happening here.
when she kicks over that first brazier, we also get that very cool Danny fire music. I think it's actually the Dance of Dragons track that we've heard before. We
Yeah.
heard it last year when Drogon arrives in the fighting pits. We also heard it way back when she first gets command of the Unsullied. You know more about the music than I do in terms of like what instruments are providing what sound, but there's that weird kind of like slide effect that happens at
Yeah.
the intro of her music that's really cool, and we hear it again here.
So yeah, she we see at this moment that it looks like Dario and Jorah and possibly the young Khaleesi have helped her, um, somehow putting some kind of flammable something in there because wow, that went up like a tinderbox really
Yeah,
fast.
that was no joke. That was like a barbecue grill at a frat party.
Call the queue that just happened. And we noticed too, I think it goes and shows us that the doors have been barred. So I'm guessing as soon as they went in there, that might have been something else that they helped with, is that they actually barred the doors shut so nobody could leave. But yeah, I'm assuming that they did something to get in there and but it's pretty dry there, so who knows?
All
It
right.
probably did go up very quickly. But yeah, she's just standing there watching everybody freak out as she continues to push over those things
The
of fire
Brazers.
there. Yeah, the braziers of fire. And the music swells, and we see the outside of the building just completely engulfed in flames. We see that all of the Dothraki, like every single one of them, seem to all be there. Hundreds of thousands of them are there to witness this, which is so wonderful because the first time that she was unburnt, there was only a couple people that saw it. There was only a handful comparatively, and now we have all of them. That the doors fall away. We see a shot of the Khaleesi's, the older Khaleesi's, and then you just see the shadow emerge from the flames.
Yeah, and we see Danny emerge from it, much like she did at the end of season one. A couple of things about this scene that are kind of interesting. Are you comfortable with the amount of joy that Danny is showing in burning people alive?
Yes. Just because I love the look on her face. I love that sense of power that she gets from it. So I'm all for her. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, she literally overturns the patriarchy. What I also really dig about this scene is that she does it herself. A lot of speculation was going to be that she constantly has these dragons in her back pocket that she can
Yeah.
use to kind of get herself out of a jam, but in this case, she doesn't do it. She does it all by herself. One tiny lady in a room full of all these like barbaric males,
Yep.
and she literally turns the tables on them and kills them all. She literally tells them that they're small men and they're not fit to lead, and she just kills them all.
And she is fit to lead them. And yeah, we see the shadow emerge from the flames. We see that it's her. All the Dothraki see that it's her, and they immediately fall to their knees.
And so does Dario, who has never seen this before. He's never
Right.
seen these like actual like powers of Danny. He's seen the dragons, of course, but he's never seen what Danny can do just on her own.
And do you notice that when he kneels, when he falls to his knees, you see his lips. saying
Yeah,
things. I don't know if he's praying. I don't know what he's saying. I'm personally thinking like, I had that. I mounted that dragon.
yeah, he rode that dragon.
He's thanking his lucky stars for that. No, it's a really really cool moment. Uh, just to see the look on his face, and here we have Jorah that's seeing it for the second time, and he's still just as in awe the second
Yeah,
time.
there's some people that made some kind of juvenile claims about how he's just trying to catch a glimpse of Danny naked before he dies, and that's all well and good. But I mean, he's seen Danny naked before. I think this is just him kind of almost renewing his faith in her and feeling that he knows that he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And also, there is a really cool docu-series that you can find online that shows the making of this scene. They've been doing them throughout the season. Every 2 episodes, they're doing these like little 10-minute docu-series, and they talk about this particular scene in the episode where they're going through how they shot it, how they lit it, how they burned it, the whole thing. That's a really, really great series for people that want to check it out. Yeah, and another thing about the end of this episode is that we now have yet another reborn character. We have the fire rebirth of Danny, we had the ice rebirth of John, but also rebirth has been a theme throughout this season. It's been a thread that's just been, you know, coming up over and over again. Every character going through some form of rebirth, whether it's Brienne or Davos or John or Danny or any of these characters, Cersei, Marjorie, Loras, everybody going through this whole process of dealing with new versions of themselves, even Ramsay and Arya. This theme of rebirth just keeps coming up over and over and over again, and we see it in all of its glory in the final shot of this episode.
And even I think you mentioned a few times that there have been this episode itself has had various themes where we had the sister brothers, we've had reunions. Um,
The
Speaking of
past,
the
conversations about the
past,
past, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So very very heavy themes in each of these. Do you have anything more to say on that?
No, I really enjoyed where this episode went. I mean, this really showed a lot of what the Game of Thrones talent is capable of when they're firing on all cylinders. I really enjoyed this episode. This kind of brings us back to some of the political intrigue and maneuvering, and it also leaves you questioning, so you're not knowing what's happening next. There's a lot of great stuff in this episode. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think the pacing so far of this season has been really, really good. I know in some of the seasons past, there have been some kind of throwaway episodes that maybe there were one or two things that were kind of interesting, but then some things just felt like filler. Um, but so far, this season has been incredibly loaded, and the pacing has been fantastic. Um, so we've got some previews of what's going to be happening in this next episode.
Yeah, and this one looks like a big one.
Yeah, we've got I don't have any notes as to what was shown in the preview. Do
Well,
you have anything?
we do get Brienne, Sansa, and Littlefinger confined in a room together, which is really interesting. That does
Yeah.
not look like they're at the wall, though. So I'm kind of curious as to where they are in that particular scene.
Yeah, I'm not sure where they are, but I'm really interested to see that confrontation that Sansa did you know about Ramsay? Uh yeah, so she's going to be putting Baelish on alert, confronting him there. Then we see what's next in that preview. We see Yara saying that
Yara, yeah,
she wants to take over. That she wants to become king. She wants to take over the Iron Islands.
yeah, she claims the Salt Throne,
Yes.
which is, I think, in the books it's called the Seastone Chair, and there are some people that have a little bit of a issue with them renaming it, but whatever. Yara is throwing her hat into the ring.
Yep. We see. What do we see next? I'm trying to
Uh,
remember.
yeah, I'm trying to remember too. I'm
Oh, you
kind of
didn't take
drawing a
notes on
blank.
that part?
I did not, but we do see a new Red Priestess talking to Tyrion and
Oh,
Varys.
yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
Israeli actress who is gorgeous.
Yes.
She is saying something to them about there's so much that you don't understand. And I also noticed that she has the same um, necklace that Melisandre wears. I'm
I
just wondering
noticed
how
that
old
too.
she is.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, so we're gonna be seeing a new Red Priestess. I wonder if is she there because she thinks Danny is the prince that was promised? Is she there to back Danny? And then we have Melisandre backing Jon Snow.
Possibly. It
Um,
it does create a nice bit of symmetry between those characters.
mhm. And then it looks like we're gonna be seeing more of Bran's visions.
And it looks like we're seeing a lot of Bran's visions. If you looked at any of the photographs, the episode 5 photographs that they released this past week, there's a lot of Bran in there, and the different visions look very varied in what we're going to see. So I'm assuming that we're going to see a lot of Bran this week.
Yeah, I'm really curious because the little clips that we saw, we see the horde of whites that are there. Um, I don't know if these are whites from in the past. Are these the ones that are from Hardhome? How far into the past are we going in this vision?
Yeah,
Is it
and
the recent past? Is it maybe a future vision? I don't know.
my guess, if I had to throw a guess out there, I think that Night's King vision that we see at the closing shot of the preview is current. I don't think it's future or past. I think it's what's happening outside of that tree that they're in right now.
So, well, yeah, it would be a vision because he's standing. So
Yeah,
would he be having then a vision? Can you have a vision of something that's happening right now? I guess you could.
I believe he could. But you know what's really interesting about that too? We see Mira trying to wake Bran up.
So yeah, something's
So
happening.
it suggests that there's something going on at the tree, and for some reason, the three-eyed raven is either not around or is incapacitated, or something has happened to the three-eyed raven where he's not there to wake Bran from whatever's happening. So I'm very curious to see how all that plays out.
I'm curious as well. I was kind of hoping that maybe we would get uh an early version of the Night's King because I'm curious to see that development. I'm curious to see where he came from or more about them because we've gotten very little about them in past seasons. It really in the past we've had one scene per season with each of them.
Right.
So we don't really know much. We know stuff from old Nan's stories, and that's about it. So I was hoping that maybe we would get a past vision from Bran that would kind of fill us in a little bit. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I think didn't you say before that it looks like we might see a Bran vision of Winterfell or something in there too? Because I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it looked like in the photos that came out
It was
this
in the
week.
photos. Okay.
Yeah, there's a very clear shot of Bran walking with the three-eyed raven in what is clearly Winterfell because you can kind of see it looks like they're actually walking out of the crypts of
Mm.
Winterfell, and Bran has kind of a almost an upset look on his face, and that photo alone has led to a lot of conjecture in the Game of Thrones community about what the hell that could possibly mean, and I'm totally without a clue.
Well, we got a lot to look forward to, a lot of things to see what plays out this season. I think we have had a really solid first episode.
I agree. I agree. Should we tell the people how to reach out to us if they want to give us feedback?
Yeah, go for that. That's your thing.
So, yes, you can find us on the Twitter, and our Twitter handle is at NerdFlixChill. You can also find us on Facebook under the same name, at NerdFlixChill, or you can just do a search for Nerdflix and Chill. Provide any feedback that you want. Tell us what we did right. Tell us things that we got wrong, because believe it or not, we're human beings who may not get everything right all the time. Maybe we'll read some of that feedback on our next episode. And yeah, looking forward to hearing from everybody.
Yeah, so thank you for tuning in for our very first episode. Stay tuned for more. We're going to be discussing each of the Game of Thrones episodes, and then, again, like we said at the beginning, we're going to be expanding. We're not just all about Game of Thrones. We're going to be talking about some of the Marvel movies we have coming out this summer.
Star Wars.
Of course, we're gonna have Star Wars. We've got Rogue One that's coming out later. We've got what Captain Amazing. What do we have coming up with Marvel
I,
movies?
I don't know what
I don't
I
either.
don't know
I'm
what
making
Captain Amazing is,
it
but I
sounds
would totally see
awesome.
it. Yeah, he sounds amazing.
He is.
What else do we have coming up? Well, we do have a lot more of Game of Thrones that we're going to do. We also have Star Wars, and I feel like we're going to talk a lot about Game of Thrones and Star Wars. But there's also things like Suicide Squad that are coming up. I believe that's a week after Captain Amazing. Uh, we'll get into some of that different stuff too with some of the other shows and movies that are coming out and around the corner. And then we're also going to do some anecdotal stuff, talk about what we're watching, what some of our favorite movies were, like maybe best movies about politics or movies with the best soundtrack. We'll get into all that different stuff. So right now we're going to be focusing a lot on